Hello, welcome to Senior Moments. I'm Dolly Simonovich. Water conservation is one of the major topics of conversation these days. Even after a rainy winter, our reservoirs are not filled. This seems to be an ongoing problem here in California. When I first moved here, it was all about rationing, but that is and was a temporary solution. Lately, the emphasis is on changes we can make to permanently reduce our water waste. I just changed my old toilet for a new model that uses less than 1.5 gallons of water per flush. The old model took 6 gallons of water and took forever to fill. I even changed my shower head. I can't tell the difference between old and new. As an added bonus, using less water saves you money. Our first guest today is Andre Johnson of the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. She's going to talk about our limited water supply and the many ways in which you can help conserve.
I'm Andre Johnson. I'm a Senior Water Resources Specialist with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, or BASCA. We are a water agency that provides regional water supply planning, resource development, and conservation program services for our 26 member agencies in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. BASCA was originally formed to represent the interests of the 26 wholesale customers to the San Francisco Regional Water System at San Francisco. Our member agencies represent about 2/3 of the water use from the San Francisco Regional Water System, and we make sure that their collective interests are represented at San Francisco and that they are achieving a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price. Water conservation is something a lot of people think of as being a drought issue, but it's actually been a long-term goal for BASCA and our member agencies, and we consider it to be an important part of our overall water supply portfolio. We rely on water conservation to make appropriate use of the limited water resources we have available to us. And because of the conservation that has taken place in this region over the past 20 years, we've been able to accommodate a lot more people and a lot more business here while still managing to reduce our overall water use. Our water supply varies quite a bit from year to year. So you can have a very wet year followed by what we call an average year followed by a dry year. And a drought is when you have an extended period with multiple dry years that really start to impact our water storage and water supply availability. For example, the last major drought prior to this one was the 1987 to 1992 drought. And during that drought, we certainly had an extended dry period. Within it, there were some years that were worse than others. We had some really extremely dry years, but then there were some years in there where snowpack and precipitation were closer to normal. This year with the drought, we have had 3 of the driest years on record in a row. Fortunately, this year, we're optimistic that it's going to be a better one, and one good year is not enough to undo the damage that has been caused by the last 4 dry years. The Lawn Be Gone program provides customers with rebates for taking out their lawns, which are the highest water use plant you can have in your yard, and replacing them with native or drought-tolerant plants. The program provides rebates here in San Bruno of up to $1 per square foot of lawn that you take out. The Lawn Be Gone program is available to any water customer in San Bruno. It's available to both residential customers as well as to commercial and industrial customers. Lawns certainly do. They are considered to be one of the highest water use plants, and it's really because they're not native to this region. Lawns have a very high evapotranspiration, meaning that the amount of water that they use per square foot is a lot higher than other plants. There are so many plant species that are adapted to this climate and are meant to grow in an area that has relatively low precipitation, and lawns just aren't one of those. Rainwater harvesting is a method by which customers can capture rainwater that falls on their own properties and use it on site to irrigate their landscapes. Customers can capture this rainwater in what we call rain barrels, which are large barrels. They come in many shapes, sizes, and designs, some fancy, some very simple, which can be used to store the rainwater after a storm for use gradually over time to irrigate gardens. Gray water is gently used water, such as water from bathroom sinks, washing machines, bathtubs, or showers, which is reused for irrigating one's landscape. There are many types of gray water systems, ranging from the most basic to very complex systems that require major plumbing improvements. The simplest types of systems might be a bucket that you keep in your shower to capture the shower water while it's warming up, that you then use to refill a fountain in your yard or irrigate your vegetable garden. There are also simple systems like the laundry to landscape system, which a homeowner who's fairly handy can install themselves. And there are quite a few resources available to someone who is looking to install a laundry to landscape gray water system. Bosca offers quite a few classes and workshops on laundry to landscape gray water system installation that are free to the public. And we also have resources available on our website for someone looking to install one of these systems. For more complex gray water systems, a contractor would likely be required, as it is critical when looking at gray water to make sure that you're not going to have a cross-connection issue where you end up mixing your gray water with your drinking water. Bosca has 2 rebate programs available to help customers reduce their indoor water use. The first is our high-efficiency toilet rebate program. Many people don't know this, but for customers in an older single-family home who haven't replaced their toilet in the last 20 to 30 years, their toilet is the highest water-using fixture within their home. In order to help customers reduce their use in this area, Bosca offers rebates of up to $125 for replacing an old toilet with a new high-efficiency model. There are quite a few ways that customers can reduce their water use without having to replace fixtures or take out their lawn. For someone looking for simple ways to save, I recommend several things indoors. First of all, never run the water when you're not using it. Turn it off when you're brushing your teeth or in between washing your dishes. It's always important to check for leaks on a regular basis and to make sure that you fix leaks as soon as you identify them, as those can be a huge water waster. For example, for your toilet, if you would like to find out if your toilet has a leak, you can just take a few drops of food coloring and put those in your toilet tank. Wait about 20 minutes, come back, and if the water in your toilet bowl has changed colors, then you know you have a leak. On the outdoor side, in the winter in particular, it is important to make sure that your sprinklers are adjusted appropriately. We have been fortunate to get some good rainfall this winter, which is all the more reason that customers should turn off their sprinklers during the winter months and take advantage of the natural precipitation to keep their gardens irrigated.
We have made some great innovations in the last 10 or 20 years. After this short break, we'll talk with a landscape architect. She will explain California's unique climate and reasons for using California native plants. Stay tuned.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it?
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got? Or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Welcome back to Senior Moments. Many of us here in San Bruno live in single-family homes. Most of these homes have big grass lawns. They're made up of Kentucky bluegrass, ryegrass, and fescue, none of which are native grasses. They require constant upkeep and need a lot of water. How many of you spend your Saturdays mowing the lawn? Not too long ago, I walked down one of the streets in San Bruno. There were several properties without any grass. They were landscaped with plants that don't take a lot of water. They were interesting and colorful. I actually lingered to have a good look. I thought, wow, how did they do that? They were beautiful. Sherry Osaka is a local landscape architect. She specializes in plants that are so well adapted to this area that many of them thrive during the summer with little or no water at all. Let's meet her.
So my name is Sherry Osaka. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state of California. I've been doing this since 1997, so almost 20 years. A landscape architect, that's very specific. It's somebody who does design and can do construction details and full construction drawings. When people say landscaper, they typically mean a landscape contractor. But there are other people in the field as well. There's landscape designers, and they can do conceptual plans and planting plans. There's irrigation specialists, but usually a landscaper is a landscape contractor. I've been passionate about native plants for a long time, and there's a lot of different reasons for it. California is a Mediterranean climate, of course, and we're one of only 5 Mediterranean climates in the whole world. It's a very, very tiny portion of our land area and our garden area. And California actually has the harshest Mediterranean climate. It is drier for a longer period than any other, and we have more temperature changes that happen in California. So our native plants are really, really adapted to this area. Many people think that all California native plants are drought tolerant. They're not. I mean, we have some plants that grow along stream sides, some plants that grow in vernal pools, bogs, near the coast, in tidal pools, things like that. But we do have a lot of plants that are very drought adapted for this area. So drought tolerant, there's lots of drought tolerant Mediterranean plants, but there's also many, many drought tolerant California native plants. There's almost 6,000 species of plants native to California, and half of those species grow nowhere else in the world. So it's very, very special. And when you use them, you get something that really speaks California. And we have a marvelous, beautiful state here with beautiful foliage and creatures, and we need to really embrace that. So a lot of people ask, when should I think about planting native plants? The ideal is actually in the fall, late September, early October. The days are shorter, the nights are cooler. The plants are going to have more time to really get established, and the rains are starting to come. And then they can get a good root system going before they have to endure that harsh summer that we have here. But that said, we put native gardens in all year long, and you might have to care for them a little bit more. You might have a few more losses if you do it in July, but you'll still have good success. A lot of times I'll put in a garden full of native plants like this one, and I warn people they may not do anything for a while, but that's okay. You're not seeing a lot of stuff happening above ground, it's all happening below ground. They've got to get a really good root system going before they're really going to start producing flowers and all of that, because they know they're going to have 6, 7, 8, 9 months of dryness in the year. The other thing that is very important is bugs eat native plants. And a lot of people are like, why would I want something that bugs eat? Well, 95 to 98% of our birds feed their young insects. Everybody knows that plants are the first trophic layer, the first layer of things that feed the whole planet. So plants are the first, but insects are the second. And so if you have native plants, you have insects that know how to eat them, and there are birds that will then feed them to their babies. And even though we bring plants in, and they've been in our area for even hundreds of years, there's very few species that will eat them. For example, a eucalyptus, which comes from Australia. There's one species of insects that eat a eucalyptus. But if you have a native oak, There's 517 different species that will feed on or in that oak tree, so it's much, much better for habitat. And a lot of people want to have birds, bees, and butterflies in their gardens. A lot of people are very concerned about the monarch butterfly, and we know that the monarch only lays its eggs on one genus of plants. It's Asclepias, or milkweed. And there are several different varieties in California of native milkweed, but without native milkweed in our gardens, or milkweed in our gardens, the monarch butterflies will not lay their eggs. We won't have more caterpillars, we won't have more butterflies. So there's a lot of symbiotic relationships between plants and insects that are really good, and we want to promote. I use drip irrigation for everything. I don't use spray irrigation at all. I don't design with it, almost never. Drip irrigation is fabulous because it lets the water out very slowly. Most of us have clay soil. Some people have sandy soil, but drip even works for sandy soil. Clay can only absorb water so fast, and spray irrigation delivers it much faster than our clay soils can soak it up. So that's when you start to get runoff and you see water in the storm drains, which we really don't want, because that's just total waste. So most people are used to drip irrigation like this, where you're punching in emitters. We call that online drip irrigation. And then the new kind is where you have a drip emitter actually in the tubing itself, so it's called inline emitters. This is the best stuff. You can't necessarily always find it at your hardware store. You have to go to an irrigation supply store, but there's many around in the area. And this just works great because you can just lay out the tubing and water your whole area, but this works really, really great. Sometimes people do ask for no maintenance gardens, and live plants need some care, so you can't really have no maintenance. Some plants, though, really take very little maintenance. Iris, Douglas iris, or Pacific Coast hybrid irises, really, they don't need anything, except for every 3 to 5 years, they might need dividing, and then you can, multiply and use them around your garden. Most plants, I would say, would benefit from a minimum of once a year tending. So clients who have had lawns and then decide to get rid of them for a native plant garden or a drought-tolerant garden, they no longer have a weekly garden service. A lot of times I tell them orderly would be just fine, as long as they're willing to do just a little bit of blowing or sweeping in the meantime, but definitely you do not need weekly anymore. How do you get rid of a lawn? A lot of people think you have to use some kind of an herbicide like Roundup or some other chemical. You really don't. Most lawns, the only exception is really Bermuda grass. That takes some special care to really get rid of it. But most lawns, you can simply sheet mulch them. So a lot of people are familiar with landscape fabric, which is a plastic material, and it stays around for 20 years and then it splits into little pieces and you're picking it out of the garden. So a better way to do it is with a biodegradable paper. You can use newspaper, 4 to 6 layers of newspaper, old cardboard boxes. I like 2 layers of, just a box flattened makes 2 layers. Or you can buy rolls of brown paper and use that in a garden. And again, 2 layers. If you cover up the lawn, you keep it from getting to the sun. You keep it from photosynthesizing. That's going to kill it. And if you let the lawn decompose in place, there's tons and tons of nitrogen in the lawn. So while it's decomposing, it's actually feeding your soil and all the microorganisms in the soil. Whereas if you used an herbicide, not only are you killing your lawn, you're killing a lot of the microorganisms in the soil. Most people think of mulch as some kind of a woody mulch, a bark mulch, or something like that. Leaves are an excellent mulch as well, especially if you shred them. And the reason that we put it in the garden is it really keeps the moisture in the soil, and it suppresses weeds, so it's kind of a twofer. Compost is leaves, coffee ground, vegetable waste, things that have been broken down by microorganisms in a pile, or usually like that. It is a very good addition to the garden because it really feeds the soil. What you learn over time, or what I learned, is you no longer think about feeding the plants. if you feed the soil and take care of the soil feeds the plant. So when you add compost, if you have really heavy clay soil, compost is the thing to kind of really lighten up that clay soil, open up spaces in it so water can drain. And if you have sandy soil, it's really good to add some compost and organic matter in it so that it can hold more of the moisture, whereas the sandy soil usually lets everything just kind of drain right through it. So compost, really, I never buy fertilizers for my garden. I just use compost in it. The difference between compost and mulch, nothing has really happened to it. It might have just been chipped. You might have gotten it from an arborist. We call that arbor chips that are chipped up. But compost is really broken down. You should not really be able to tell what it was before. You shouldn't really be able to see pieces of leaves. It should be pretty well broken down. It should really be dark brown. It should really smell good. Whereas bark mulch or even shredded leaves for mulch, you're really seeing the particles of it. Now that said, I do use compost as mulch in my vegetable gardens. That's like the one place that I really like to use compost. Once the soil is really warmed up, I'm almost ready to do that in my vegetable garden. My tomatoes are in, the soil is getting nice and warm, we're starting to get to the warmer days. That's a really good time to put 1 to 2 inches of compost as a mulch in your vegetable garden, and that's going to feed your vegetables for another year. You know, there's something really special that happens, I find, when you get away from lawn and you go to gardening with native plants and gardening organically. There's something I find that really touches my soul when I do that, and just really seeing all the creatures, little lizards, bees, butterflies, birds. I get so many more birds in my garden now that I've gone to native plants, and I just find them endlessly fascinating. It's like another dimension that you're adding. It's this change and this movement that you're really getting in there. To me, it really feels right. So I really encourage everybody to do it. It's creating a little bit of peace in your own backyard. For native plants, I would really recommend the California Native Plant Society. That's a California, obviously, organization. There's one for the Bay Area as well, the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. You can find recommendations for gardeners and people that do native plants, gardeners and designers. They also have a lot of their talks videotaped. So you can go to their education and presentation, and they have a lot of talks videotaped, like on rainwater harvesting, on designing your own native garden, on attracting bees, butterflies, things like that. So that's a really good source. There's also Yerba Buena Nursery is in Half Moon Bay. They have an excellent website with lots of garden guides and information about individual native plants. My website is sustainable-landscape.com. On there I have some presentations that I've done in the past for classes. I just did one last night on designing your own native garden, and all the class materials are up there. Yeah, and there's lots of future classes and information there as well.
6,000 plants to choose from. Half are drought tolerant and are not found anywhere else in the world. Wow. Sherry teaches some free workshops offered by Bosca all about landscape using native and drought-tolerant plants. Go to their website for information on the up-and-coming workshops. As Sherry said, the plants feed the bugs feed the birds and other wildlife. Our next guest, Dr. Gordon Franke, is all about the bees.
Well, my name is Gordon Franke, and I'm a faculty member at the University of California, Berkeley. My specialty is bees, flowers they like, and the people that interact with both the bees and the flowers. My specialty is California bees, but I also work in Costa Rica in a certain region where they also have wonderful bees. Actually, the country of Costa Rica has 800 species of bees, which most people don't realize. California, we have 1,600 different species of bees. We try to spread the word about the value of bees, and the value of bees for their own sake, and also for the fact that they pollinate most of the 6,500 plant types that we have in California. and they also pollinate a lot of our food plants that we come to enjoy. In fact, 30% of the food plants that we have on our plate have had a pollination event before they got to our plate. Bees really are interested in three things. They're interested in pollen, nectar, and sex. That's what they're interested in. So you're not on the list. So unless you tease a bee or grab a bee, you're not going to get stung. And taking that a little bit further, bees are vegetarians. They're not carnivores. The wasps are the carnivores. So for example, when people talk to us about, what can I do about these meat bees? We always say to them, that's not a bee, that is a wasp. And they're after your hamburger, hot dog, and Coca-Cola. In the Bay Area, if you're taking only urban into account, probably I would say that we have at least 200 to 250 species of bees. If you were to take in all of the wild areas associated with urban, things like the coastal range, probably the number would go up to 500 or 600 species. Honeybees are the only bee we have at the moment that makes a honey that we harvest. There are no native bees that we have in California that make honey. Now that always leads to a question. Well, what good are these bees? Well, I pause a little bit, smile, and usually say, well, just think of all the beautiful California wildflowers and the California flora. We have 6,500 types of plants in California. They have evolved and co-evolved with the native bees here. And without those bees working all the time, when you're not looking, we wouldn't have the gorgeous flowers that we have. Now, in addition, these native bees do a lot of pollinating and a lot of visiting of non-native plants, because native bees also have the ability to expand their host range of flowers that they visit. And they also go to a lot of non-natives as well. Some things like lavender is the first thing that comes to mind. The other thing that we're finding out now to be the case in California, especially in agricultural areas, is there's a relationship between native bees in urban areas where people plant plants that they like and adjacent agricultural fields. It looks like a lot of these bees are moving from urban areas into the agricultural fields whenever they feel like it, because bees are always searching for new sources of food. And the reason why they search is because that's how they evolved to begin with the California flora. If you know anything about the California flora, many of the flowers are herbaceous. That is, they're very short-lived, they're annuals, and they flower relatively quickly. And the bees have to be aware that once the flowering stops or declines, they have to move elsewhere. So the bees have it built into their genetic makeup that they have to be searching all the time. So they are searching. So this is what makes urban or habitat gardening for bees in urban environments very successful. And that is, you plant a garden and almost within a matter of minutes, you can expect bees to show up if you have flowers. It's that fast, because bees are always searching. Gardeners can do a lot to help bees in the home garden. Probably the one thing that we recommend right away to people is, well, two things. First of all, plant the right plants. And there are plant lists now from a variety of organizations, including ours from the University of California. But there's also the Pollinator Partnership list. There's also the Xerces Society lists. All of these have the kinds of plants that you should be planting that bees like. You plant the plants, the bees will come. The other thing you should not be doing is you should not be using chemical pesticides in your garden. You may have target plants like aphids or something else that you don't like, but those chemicals, when they go out in the garden, they also hit non-target organisms like bees and beneficial wasps, beneficial flies. Do whatever you can not to use chemicals. There are many alternatives to using chemicals, and those should be used, including a very simple one, which is if you have a plant that's bothered by aphids or whiteflies or whatever, consider taking the plant out and putting something else in its place and not using chemicals. In my lab, we use the term mulch madness, and it came about in watching the college playoff basketball games when they were talking about March Madness. And they also had some ads on TV at that time about using mulch. And I thought, this is simply mulch madness in March. We have to tell people, use mulch sparingly. You can use it, just don't use it and cover thick layers of your garden entirely with mulch, because most of the bees in California, about 70%, are ground nesters. They have to use soil to make their nests. They have to be able to get to the soil. If you have thick mulch all over the place, especially redwood shavings, or even eucalyptus, big chunks of eucalyptus, they can't get through that. So there's two things to do there, and that is be very careful about using the compost material, the mulch material, sparingly around just the plants that need it, or hope that your neighbors are messy and that they are not mulching. Then the bees will have a place to nest. We can't guarantee that the bees are going to nest in your garden anyway, but the point is you're making it hard for them, and we know that gardens can also support nesting bees. So don't make it too hard for them by having mulch everywhere. We also want to tell people that you have power. You have power and you have facilities and capacities that we don't have as biologists. So you have ways to reach out to your garden clubs. You have ways to reach out to Native Plant Society chapters in your area. You have ways to reach out to communities and schools and get things started that are attractive. In fact, the schools is a good place to start doing some work, because kids love the garden and they love to see the organisms. And we work with several schools, and the teachers and the kids love to get out and do things.
We have given you many different angles to look at with respect to our most precious resource, the water supply here in California. It is up to each of us to do what we can to ensure we have enough water for our ever-growing population. In case you need even more incentive to plant some drought-tolerant plants, the San Bruno Beautification Task Force gives awards to people who improve their landscape. You can nominate yourself, a neighbor, or a friend. Annually, the nomination deadline is mid-August, and the awards are given out at a city council meeting in October. Thank you for watching Senior Moments. Until next time, I'm Dolly Simonovich.